So Davante Adams has continuously went on these public podcasts, and he has continuously taken shots at the Las Vegas Raiders. We're going to talk about what Davante Adams ultimately said a little bit later on, but I want to talk about a guy that's actually going to get a second opportunity to come out there and prove himself coming up here against the Denver Broncos. We're talking about rookie running back Dylan Laube, a guy that a lot of us were very, very excited to watch. Dylan Laube, to me, is a rookie that has upside, but he is a rookie. And he didn't play at an FBS school like Georgia or Alabama. And a lot of his upside, I think, is going to come more so as the season kind of progresses, as he comes into his second and third year, because that's when the speed of the game kind of slows down. But Dylan Laube is going to actually get another opportunity with the Raiders coming up, because the fact that the Raiders have two players that are ultimately hurt at that position. Both Alexander Mattison and Zamir White are likely to miss this game against the Denver Broncos. And that means Dylan Laube is going to get another opportunity to go out there and play a little bit. Now, Amir Abdullah is expected to start for the Raiders, but from what I've heard, Dylan Laube is going to end up getting 40% of all the touches that the running backs can ultimately get. He'll get about 40% of all the snaps. Amir Abdullah historically has been our third down running back, but now he's kind of expected to be the lead back. I think what's going to end up happening is these guys are going to swap on different drives. You know, Amir Abdullah might have the first two drives, and then Laube will get that third drive. And then we might be in a 2-minute situation, and it might be Amir Abdullah that comes in. But then when the second half rolls around, it'll be Dylan Laube that starts on the second half of the football, right? Dylan Laube is going to get another opportunity, and I'm excited for this because Dylan Laube has upside. But we've seen over preseason, we saw it on his one and only carry this season against the Pittsburgh Steelers. The guy fumbled the football, and he has an issue with fumbling. I'm going to be the first to tell you guys, if a running back cannot hold on to the football, he has no business out there. Fumbling is a real concern that I have with Dylan Laube, but I also do recognize that the fact that, you come from a school that's not an FBS school, it's not at the top, the speed of the game's different. You don't have the strength that you would have had if you went to a different type of school and played at that type of level. You don't have the strength, you're not used to the speed, so guys are quicker. Guys are going to punch that ball out faster. It's just something you got to just kind of get used to. But we are also at the point now, we're in the second half of the season. So this is when Dylan Laube is going to be a little bit more comfortable. This is when things should be a little bit easier for him. Now, one of the things we also have to recognize is Dylan Laube came in and it was Luke Getsy, right? Luke Getsy was the guy calling plays, and now it's different. Now it's not Luke Getsy anymore. Now, as we kind of go forward, it's going to be Scott Turner. It's going to be Scott Turner's scheme specifically. One of the things that I think some people don't talk about that we will talk about on this channel is if you watch every single one of Dylan Laube's runs. He had a couple runs that went for 1 yard, 2 yards, 3 yards. A lot of those bad runs were actually power run concepts. The Raiders ran ISO multiple times with Dylan Laube, which doesn't make sense to me. They ran duo multiple times. That also doesn't make sense to me. Essentially what you're doing is you're telling Dylan Laube to run in between the tackles. To me, Laube is the type of guy you want running towards the sideline. His two biggest carries, one was an 8-yard run against the San Francisco 49ers. That was an outside zone run towards the right. His second run was against the Minnesota Vikings. That was a split zone concept. So they're both zone runs. And essentially zone runs are all about vision. It's all about reading, finding that gap and just hitting that gap, right? As opposed to power is really allowing your blockers to kind of do their thing and then you just kind of follow those blockers. To me, Dylan Laube in zone makes sense. And with Luke Getsy's not the type of guy that looks at the guy that's in the football game and then call a play for that guy back there. Right? One of the things we know for a fact with Luke Getsy was he would call zone runs for Zamir White and then he'd call power runs for Alexander Mattison because he just called whatever he thought would have worked in that moment of the game. Not looking at the personnel that was out there, right? He did that a lot. And I think with Scott Turner, one of the things he proved right away in that first game was the fact that he doesn't do that. When Zamir White was in the game, the 5 carries he had, majority of that was power-based concepts. We ran counter a couple times. We ran power a couple times. We ran duo at least once. When Madison was in the game, most of that was zone, right? To me, Scott Turner is at least showing improvement that he's going to put his running back in the best situation to have success. And I think with Dylan Laube getting that opportunity, I'm excited to see what this guy can actually do for the Raiders. I do think there's upside with Dylan Laube. I think a lot of people are kind of out on him after he had those fumbles early on. The one fumble against the Pittsburgh Steelers specifically was the only carry he's had this season. And he hasn't played since that point. And I think for the Raiders, it's about time you give carries to these guys, you give touches to these guys, and you put the faith in these guys, right? You spent a draft pick on Dylan Laube, so there's no reason why Laube should not be able to get some carries and have some opportunities against the Denver Broncos. Obviously, the Broncos are a really, really good defense, so it's going to be hard however it comes, but something tells me that the Raiders' offensive line should be able to have success against the Broncos. This will be the second week in a row now that Scott Turner will call plays. Second week in a row where Joe Philbin will be coaching the offensive line. And this is the second week in a row we're going to have this unit specifically out there. All right, with Jordan Merritt at that one guard position, Dylan Parham at the other, Powers Johnson at center, Glaze, Miller, and that too, Miller's looked really, really good. Powers Johnson's looked really good. I think we should be able to find some success against the Denver Broncos this week. And I'm excited to see what Dylan Laube can do. I'm excited to see what the Raiders can also, kind of do as we go forward. But there's another thing we got to talk about. And this is something I hate talking about. I think this is going to be the final time I'm going to even bring this guy up on this channel. I am over this guy, man, and that is Davante Adams. I've had it up to this point with Davante, man. When the Raiders initially traded Davante Adams, I understood for Davante. I said to myself, you know what? I feel Davante Adams. He came to the Raiders. He thought, I'm coming to the Raiders. This is exactly what I want to do. I'm closer to my family. I have a quarterback that I like. An offensive coordinator at that time was Josh McDaniels. I believe in it. I believe in the system. And after coming here, I think he probably realized really quickly the difference between playing with Aaron Rodgers and basically most quarterbacks in the NFL. And I think he regretted it right away. Right, and I understood that. I get it. And then he tried staying with the Raiders for as long as it could, and things just got uglier and uglier and uglier to the point where it just didn't make sense for him, right? If he wanted to try to have success for the rest of his career, if he thought I can get to the Jets and potentially turn them around, he thought he could do all this, right? And I got it at that point. But we're getting to the point where this guy's going on to every single radio show that he goes on to and does every interview he does, and he just takes shots at the Raiders. Over and over and over again. This guy's just taking shots at the Raiders. And I'm at the point where, why? Why do you got to keep taking shots at the Raiders? I want you guys to listen into some of what he said on this podcast, and we're going to talk about it on the other side.
There's a lot of narratives out there. Twitter has blown this whole thing up, Davante. Twitter has said, Aaron's done. Aaron's not a Jet next year. You're not a Jet next year. What do you think? That's what the world is saying.
Yeah, what I'm worried about at this very moment is trying to make sure that we pack the car seats for this trip that I'm going on. And that's really all that I'm focused on. Whether or not I'm here next year, I can't determine that. I'm not really thinking about next year. I'm thinking about trying to get a few more wins before we get out of here. Because if you bet me $1 million, I would have taken the bet. We would not have only had one victory right now. And, football is a tough sport. And obviously you look at it, people are obviously going to talk about whether or not it was the right thing to do for me to leave, teasing at the fact that, not much has changed as far as the record, or, I haven't gone for 100 yards many times. And it's just a bunch of people just doing what they do. And it doesn't bother me at all. I don't, honestly, like I said, I don't pay any attention to, the chatter on the outside. And when I say I don't pay attention to it, I don't read it, any of it. Anything that I do here doesn't really matter to me, because if I had, if they think I was the best in the world still, or whatever, it's still not going to have any bearing on the way that I play. So I'm not really concerned on that. It's more about trying to make sure I get the most out of this season at this point. And regardless of whether or not it was the right thing to do, it was the right thing for me to do to come here and change scenery. And I think there's no denying that things are different. We haven't won the games that we were maybe supposed to win, or, hoping to win. But when you look at the situation I was in Vegas, and you look at the situation I'm in here, with the way that this offense is able to, the potential of this offense, or at least I at least feel hopeful that, going into the next game, that we'll be able to have a good performance. And just based off of, different variables in Vegas, I started to not feel that way, even about myself and what I was able to go out and, contribute week in and week out. And there may be games where I have, 40 yards or something like that. And, I don't rock the stat sheet, but I still have a feeling that going into that game, we're going to be able to do our thing on that, minimum the offensive side of the ball, because that's the only side that I can, have something to do with. So at least just not feeling just helpless and hopeless, that at least, makes me feel better knowing I came here, gave it the shot. I'm still working with somebody that, I have a lot of confidence in, and still can play ball at a high level. We just got to find a way to execute better and more consistently. And that's really what it comes down to.
So to me, the big thing with what Davante is trying to say is, he's saying that he doesn't feel like he made the wrong decision, right? Essentially, that's what he's trying to tell us. I did not make the wrong decision, because when I look at the situation with the Raiders, when I look at the situation I'm in now, I'm at least hopeful that we'll have a good performance here. Essentially what he's saying is, I'm hopeful that I'll be able to put up numbers. I'm hopeful that me statistically will have a good game, because the Jets aren't winning any games. They're not winning anything more than what the Raiders are winning this year. When the Jets traded for Davante, I thought, okay, maybe Davante could give them a spark. Maybe they can have a little bit of success. And they have not. They've won one game since that point. And to me, Davante is not going to change a whole lot, because we've seen it, right? This guy's play was kind of coming down already, even with the Raiders. And obviously, Aaron Rodgers has taken a massive step backwards with the injury that he had. He's not the same player he once was. So the Jets aren't winning any more than where the Raiders are. Both teams are in a bad spot, but for Davante to continuously go on these shows and continuously have to bring it up that I'm in a much better spot than where I was with the Raiders, you're literally in the same spot. It makes no difference. To me, it doesn't make sense when this guy continuously goes on these shows and continues to say, with the Raiders, I was helpless. I was hopeless with the Raiders. Doesn't make sense to me, right? Davante Adams is getting to the point where we've seen some other wide receivers with the Raiders are currently at. One of the things I really appreciate with Derek Carr is that when Derek Carr and the Raiders split up, it wasn't beautiful, it wasn't perfect, it wasn't roses. But Derek Carr never once trashed the Raiders, and I have so much respect for him for essentially doing that. Because when he could have bashed the Raiders, when they went through the whole Josh McDaniels situation, when they went through, the different things that have kind of happened with the Raiders, he could have continuously bashed this football team, but he doesn't. Right? So shout out to Derek Carr. Hopefully Davante recognizes that he is essentially, with any Raider fans that he may have had, he's losing those fans real quick, right? Let's wrap this video up and talk a little bit about Mark Davis selling 15% more of the ownership of the Raiders. This one's kind of crazy to me, right? Because Mark Davis just sold 10.5% to 0.5% to Richard Seymour, 5% to Tom Brady, 5% to Tom Brady's business partner, and now he's selling 15% to two more essential investors, right? I don't know why the Raiders would be selling another 15%. What does Mark Davis gain from selling 15% of the Raiders? I was thinking about this, and it didn't make sense to me. Mark Davis has moved to Vegas. You would think that Vegas is a place where Mark Davis is getting a lot more cash, right? And he doesn't have to continue to sell the team to continue to raise more cash, because at some point that's not going to work. Right? At some point, selling the team is not going to work. You're going to be out of your entire shares of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, there's only two things that make sense to me. Either one, Mark Davis is 100% ready to move on from the Raiders. He no longer wants to be a part of the franchise, which that would be very shocking to me. And number two is that the Raiders are looking to make some big moves coming up this offseason. With Mark Davis selling the Raiders, there's a chance that the Raiders, who have over $100 million in cap space, are looking at it like maybe want to make another big splash the way we did with Christian Wilkins. When you sign a guy like Christian Wilkins, let's say you give him $100 million, and let's say 70 of that 100 million is guaranteed. Well, what happens with that 70 million is Mark Davis has to put that up front, and the NFL puts it into a trust essentially until it's ready to be paid out to Christian Wilkins. But when you give someone that type of contract, you have to put the cash up front, right? And maybe the Raiders are looking to make a big splash move with some player out there. Maybe it's T. Higgins. Maybe there's a defensive player that they want, or maybe it's a quarterback. Maybe Tom Telesco has said, let's go out and let's pay a quarterback $30 million. There's something going on with the Raiders, because it doesn't make sense for Mark to continuously sell the team. By my math, he's essentially got to sell 25% of the team in the last 6 months, right? This will be voted on in about 3 weeks from now. If they agree to that in the last 2 2 months essentially when it actually went through, Mark Davis would have sold 25% of the Raiders. And that's crazy to me to think, because Mark Davis also never owned 100% of the Raiders, right? There were other partners involved in the Las Vegas Raiders. So it's interesting to me why Mark Davis is essentially selling. Either he's done with the Raiders, or two, he looks at it like, I want to put some I want to get some cash to be ready for this offseason. Also, remember, the Raiders have a bunch of free agents that they got to bring back. Guys like Trayvon Merrick and Nate Hobbs and Malcolm Koonce, they're going to need contracts. I do think he also recognizes that those contracts are going to be costly as well. But lastly, what about all the other money that the Raiders have been making? Where's all that money been going? What about the money from selling 10% to Tom Brady and his business partner? Where is that cash going? Right, I hope the Raiders are not putting themselves in a really, really bad spot, Mark Davis specifically, where they're not going to be able to have key free agents come. There was a rumor today that Andy Reid got a $20 million per year contract. Essentially, he got a 5-year, $100 million contract. So if Andy Reid got a 5-year, $100 million contract, well, what if we wanted to sign Ben Johnson? How much do you think Ben Johnson wants? I don't think it's going to cost like $1 million a year. Like, Ben Johnson can go out there and say, I want $12 million to come to the Las Vegas Raiders. And if the Raiders want him, they're going to have to pay him. Remember, there was a entire thing with Cliff Kingsbury not coming to the Raiders because the Raiders didn't have the money to pay him, or apparently Mark Davis didn't want to necessarily pay him. And that never made sense to me, right? That the Raiders couldn't pay an offensive coordinator. Remember, this is not $20 million, right? An offensive coordinator gets, what, $1 or $2 million max? So it was kind of shocking to me. And Mark Davis selling such a large percent of his ownership is kind of interesting as well. So we'll see what ends up happening. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. Thumbs up, subscribe, and I'll see you guys next time with another video.